you are watching this video, it's because you have intrusive thoughts that are plaguing your mind. You are probably having a difficult time trying to sleep, and you just wish that you could just shut off your brain. In this video, I will provide you with 3 introspective strategies in order to help you combat those intrusive thoughts so that you can have peace of mind. I will do this by first explaining why we have intrusive thoughts, and then dive into the 3 strategies that can help. Sigmund Freud argued that the mind is responsible for balancing between our sensitivity to external stimuli and our ability to cope or respond to that particular stimuli or stressor. The window of tolerance is an example of how we can understand our capacity to cope with external stressors, as well as what happens to a person when something is so stressful, when there's something that's going on in the external environment or particular situation. Now, this could fall outside of the window of tolerance, and all of a sudden you can be feeling very overwhelmed, scared. You might even feel symptoms associated with depression or anxiety. For example, you may have had the ability or capacity to cope with very stressful situations, but following the death of a loved one, a very close loved one, your window of tolerance might have shrunk, which means certain things that you were able to cope with might now fall outside of your window of tolerance, which means you might not be able to cope with that particular stressor. The decrease in one's window of tolerance or the ability to cope or deal with a particular stressor induces, like I mentioned, various different symptoms associated with anxiety, depression, and even post-traumatic stress disorder, which can include nightmares, can also include unwanted thoughts, and flashbacks. When it comes to intrusive thoughts, it is not uncommon that people want to simply avoid them. I mean, why not? Why would we want to dive into something that is terrifying or very worrisome? So what ends up happening is people tend to actively repress, shoving down in the conscious mind into the unconscious mind and trying to bury those intrusive thoughts, avoid those intrusive thoughts. Whether you said something silly and embarrassing at work, or whether you're trying to process your grief, intrusive thoughts can plague the mind. Actively repressing intrusive thoughts, trying to avoid and bury those intrusive thoughts, can be advantageous as a short-term band-aid effect to help us with getting just through the day, just helping us function. But unfortunately, those intrusive thoughts don't stay buried for long. Those thoughts, feelings, experiences try to leave the unconscious mind and pierce its way through the conscious mind, forcing you to face your trauma. And like I said, this can happen in the form of dreams, unwanted thoughts at very inopportune times, as well as flashbacks. So feeling as if you're right back to that trauma, that you're experiencing it again. You could taste it, see it, feel it. All of this, these traumas, intrusive thoughts, flashbacks, nightmares, night terrors, can have a significant impact on the mind and ultimately a significant impact on our behavior, how we treat ourselves, how we treat others, and especially how we show up in the world. If we're avoiding our thoughts, if we're avoiding our trauma, it's not uncommon that we are also behaving in such a way as avoiding certain stimuli as well. So for instance, if your trauma is associated with a car accident and now you're experiencing anxiety as a result of that car accident, no wonder why you would want to avoid driving. It's terrifying. It is so scary. And this can especially plague your mind when you're trying to fall asleep. So here are 3 introspective strategies that can help you face your fear, face your trauma, face those intrusive thoughts. The first strategy involves identifying and understanding the trauma as a loss of control that has destroyed the way in which you perceive the world. Like I said, it is typical for people to want to avoid and bury those intrusive thoughts. But if you try very, very hard not to think of something, such as if I asked you not to think about a white bear, well, you're going to think about the thing that you don't want to think about because you're actively thinking about repressing that thing that you don't want to think about. I know, that is a mouthful. Woo! And that is exactly what happens in the mind. Your mind gets confused, your mind gets jumbled because you are going to be thinking about the thing you don't want to think about, the white bear. So clearly this process does not work. So trauma ultimately destroys what was once good and wholesome and turns it into something nasty, terrible, horrible. In other words, trauma is destructive because there is a breakdown of the belief that there is a stable and predictable world. Everything that was once cherished and this illusion of control that you had all becomes tarnished. In order to fight against the feeling of losing control, it's important to understand what you have control over in that situation. So in other words, there might be so many factors or unchangeable factors that you have no control over. But that doesn't mean that 100% of the time you don't have any control. You do have control over what is happening in the present. You have control over what you do in terms of your behavior. And you also have control in making choices in the moment, that you can do something better for yourself. So here's a thought experiment. Allow yourself to take the time and to gather your thoughts and to find evidence to suggest that you were in control. So for instance, if you were giving a presentation, you were the facilitator, you were the leader, you were in control of that meeting. Add that to your evidence list. Add situations in which you've made a decision and something panned out, or you made a decision and you had to pivot because it didn't really work out, but maybe it ended up working out in the end. Those are forms of control. So even though control ultimately might be an illusion because we can't control everything that happens in our life, there are certain things we can control. And the more in which you gather evidence and are aware that you can be in control of certain things can allow you to feel a little bit more comfortable. Number 2 is trauma can negatively impact our relationships. Attachment theory suggests that we need people to survive. Emotionally, even just the basic necessities of life. If you think about it, when we're born, we can't be independent. We can't take care of ourselves. So we have a caregiver, what we call a parent. And this parent is feeding us, changing us until we grow and we're able to be independent. So we need people. Evolution has also taught us that we need people to survive. That the human race survived because we were in groups. We were able to hunt, we were able to gather food, and we did this in groups in order to survive. It is important to note that relationships, interpersonal relationships, are very important because that is connected to the way in which we view ourselves and the way in which we view ourselves as having purpose, a sense of meaning in life. Relationships help to understand who we are, help us to understand who we are looking for in terms of friendships or romantic relationships, what we're willing to tolerate and what we're not willing to tolerate, what our level of expectation is, as well as how we go about behaving in the world and presenting in the world. If we feel connected to people and we have healthy relationships, then our behavior is going to be in line with that level of positivity and maybe emotional support, that we're going to feel maybe a little bit more confident. Our self-esteem might be elevated. But if we feel disconnected from society, if we feel left alone, rejected, or abandoned, then our behavior is going to look very different. There might be some trust issues, which means people might not take the risk in developing a relationship or starting a relationship. So someone might not say hi to another person in a coffee shop and begin a conversation or begin a friendship or relationship. They might have issues with trust and therefore might keep people at arm's length. Why is this important when we're talking about intrusive thoughts and trauma? Well, it's important because a lot of people tend to isolate after experiencing a trauma. They want to be by themselves. They want to sometimes sob or just reside in that misery. And then it becomes very difficult for them to reach out and maybe have a conversation with people because also they feel that people might not understand, especially if they've gone through something that is very traumatic. Witnessing the loss of a loved one, the death of a loved one, can be very traumatic. And having that conversation with family or friends or coworkers or a romantic partner might not be as beneficial because you might feel as though people just don't understand and you're all alone. But that could be your fantasy. So that can end up stopping you from building healthy relationships that can very well help you. There might be someone who actually understands. There might be a family member who understands, or a romantic partner who understands. Or even if they don't understand, they're trying to understand in order to support you. Building this relationship and building your support network is so important because we get healthy together. When working together, whether it's a peer support group, you are seeking professional treatment and support, seeing a therapist or a psychiatrist, or you're using your informal supports, your family, your friends, your coworkers, your spiritual advisors, ministers, anyone can really help you to process that pain, to not only get it out of you, but people might also have their 2 cents and recommendations that you might find beneficial as well. So having healthy relationships, healthy connections, whether they're formal supports or informal supports, will help you to express yourself, will help to get the trauma out of you. So then this way you don't have to hold on to it. Also, when talking about relationships, it's going to be important to build a relationship with yourself, which means being real with yourself. So one, if you are angry, then let out that anger in a healthy way. So for instance, if there was the death of a loved one, not only might you be feeling sad, but you might also feel angry at this person. You might feel as though this person abandoned you. So it's okay to be angry. It's okay to let it out. It's okay to swear if you need to and yell at the top of your lungs if you're in the comfort of your own home and in a private area. If you want to let it out, let it out. This is really healthy for you to get it out. Second would be to express and explore your fantasy. So whether you're angry or you're feeling sad and lonely and rejected, it's important to figure out what is going on here, to dive into the fantasy. Well, what happens to you when you feel alone? What happens to you when you think about the death of your loved one and feeling rejected or abandoned or feeling sad, or that this world has now lost a beautiful and important person? What is your experience? What happens to you? What do you feel? How do you react? How do you respond? How do you interact with people? And a third strategy for building a relationship with yourself includes exploring what gives you pleasure. Remember that even though you might be an adult or you might be a teenager, you do have an inner child. And we can sometimes forget what our childhood looks like. Or if we had a very difficult or neglectful childhood, what the ideal childhood looked like or can look like. So you can actually access that inner child and you can think and reflect, well, what motivates me to get up every single day? What gives me a sense of pleasure? What do I like to do even if I feel terrible and if I just want to hide and not see anybody? What do you connect with? Are you artistic? Are you analytical? Do you like nature? Who are you? If you remember that as a kid you loved playing in the mud, what's stopping you now? Whether you're 13 or whether you're 43, what's stopping you from jumping in a mud puddle if this is something that is so fun for you and exciting? Why not go out in the rain and enjoy? If that is what your inner child wants, why stop yourself? Why limit yourself? So building a relationship not only involves being real with yourself and connecting with your feelings, but also connecting with your inner child's pleasure and fun, and that life doesn't always have to be so serious or so difficult. Now, the third introspective strategy that I'm going to talk about involves getting your thoughts out. You don't have to hold on to your trauma as if it's luggage, as if you're traveling to Europe. No, you can get rid of that luggage. We don't want that, but we can't get rid of it by simply avoiding it. We can only get rid of it if we face it. Open up that luggage. See what's in there. What's it all about? This way we can process it instead of burying it. One way to get your thoughts out and open up that trauma luggage that you've been carrying around for so long involves attending therapy with a qualified specialist who is able to provide a psychoanalytic approach. So for instance, if you're experiencing trauma, it's not uncommon to find a CBT or DBT therapist that can help you with your trauma. And they can be very helpful looking at the cognitive aspects, looking at developing coping strategies and skills. But if you want to learn what is driving your symptoms, what is really pushing those intrusive thoughts, then a psychoanalytic or psychoanalysis approach is going to be more beneficial than a CBT or DBT approach. Secondly, you can free associate, and you can do this yourself by just opening up your thoughts, opening up your feelings, and you can either write down or in a voice note, you can articulate exactly how you're feeling, what you are thinking, what your experiences are, what your relationships were like, positive or negative. What has your childhood development looked like? Everything and anything that comes to mind, even if it's superficial and it has to do with the weather, is going to be all important. Just let it out, let it flow. It doesn't even have to make sense. Just let it out. And the more in which you talk, the more in which you let it out and let it flow, you are not hanging on to it. You are not keeping it inside you, which is so beneficial because it gives you room to breathe. So this way, when you hit your pillow at night and you try to go to sleep, you can, because there's no lingering thoughts that you haven't dealt with. Or if there is difficulty falling asleep, then there is something you might have missed. And diving into it a little bit at night might be helpful, but allowing yourself also to build a relationship with yourself, including having a nighttime routine, being able to engage in strategies and routines that can help relax the body, help relax the mind. Because if you're able to get proper sleep and you're able to eat properly, then you're able to fuel your body, which means then you're better able and better equipped to reflect. Your cognitive capacities will be enhanced, and you will be in a better position to be more insightful, more mindful of what has happened or happening to you. So in this video, I discussed why we have intrusive thoughts and how trauma can play a role in activating those thoughts, which can fall outside of the window of tolerance. I also discussed in detail 3 introspective strategies that can help you to combat those intrusive thoughts so you can sleep better and so you can function better on a day-to-day. The more that you work through your trauma, even though it can be very scary, the more your psyche is strengthened and your window of tolerance can expand. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more interesting and helpful content. While you are waiting for my next video, you can click on this video here where I go into detail about addiction.